Welcome to episode 102 of the Microsoft Cloud IT Pro podcast, recorded live on November 30th, 2018. This is a show about Office 365, Azure, and the IT Pro and end user side of life, where we discuss a topic or recent news related to Office 365 or Azure and how it relates to you as an IT Pro. I'm Scott.
And I'm Ben.
And in this show, we discuss what's been happening with Azure AD MFA and how to have fun with nested virtualization in Azure.
How's it going today, Scott? Happy after Thanksgiving, and we don't have any more money because we spent it all on fun gadgets on Black Friday and Cyber Monday.
I spent a little bit more money than I was supposed to, so I don't know if you have the problem where your loved ones in your life, maybe it be, wife, significant other, family, things like that, where they all whine and complain heavily that there's never anything they can buy you for a holiday because you buy it all yourself, like as soon as it pops up and it's on sale and you get a good deal and all those kinds of things. So there were a ton of deals on things like televisions, and I've been eyeing a new TV for a while, and Target had this great sale where it was, 15% off on top of the regular sales. And then I do that Target red card thing to get the extra 5%.
Yep.
So it's like 20% off on top of what was already a 30% discount, which was pretty meaty. So I ended up with this really nice 70-inch TV with Dolby Vision, does HDR10, does all the things I would need it to do. And it was a really great price. So I told my wife, I said, we're going to the store and we're going to buy this TV. And she goes, okay, this is your Christmas present. And I said, awesome. So we're going to swipe my card, but we're going to pretend you bought it for me, right? Yay, holidays.
Yep.
This is how I get around the whole, I'm not allowed to buy myself things, is I buy myself things while others are there. So I ended up with this really great TV at an awesome price that it turns out was too big for my existing entertainment center. So not too big for the space, like it fit in the alcove and everything,
Yep.
but it was actually too big for the entertainment stand. The new TV was too wide. So that presented itself with a problem. I had this great new TV that I could not put on the stand. So we actually went out and kind of, rigged something up to make that happen. I had a bunch of extra wood laying around for something. So it's like, honey, we're going to have to deal with this for a day or two so that, I can set up the new 70-inch TV and have a bunch of fun with it. So we did that. And then I was looking at it. I was like, we're not going to go with this. And I was like, I want to do built-ins and we can pull it out from the wall. I was like, yeah, that all sounds great. Let's do some built-ins, but I think I want to put the TV over the fireplace. And I don't know if you've ever seen the way most people mount their TVs over the fireplaces. They end up with this thing that's way up high. It might tilt or not tilt, and it might pull out just a little bit, but it typically pulls out on a horizontal plane, and then it tilts. So you still got to lift your head up and look way up, and, you get weird neck crinks and all that other kind of stuff. But there's these glorious mounts, which are actually pull-down mounts that you can typically get anything from, maybe like 10 to 15 inches of vertical travel in. So I found one that holds a massive amount of weight. It worked perfectly with like 24-inch on-center studs, which of course, I couldn't have like normal studs over my fireplace. I had to have this wacky 24-inch thing. So I found this awesome mount that has 27 inches of travel, which is great. So it actually comes down lower from above my fireplace, being almost all the way up at the ceiling, than the TV actually would have been at the stand on the entertainment center. And then once it's all the way down, it can still rotate 45 degrees either way, so left or right. So it actually has 90 degrees of travel in it, which is awesome. But this presented itself with another problem. Now the TV's over the fireplace, I don't actually have like a wall wart for power up there. So now I have to run the power and get all the channel and all those kinds of things. Long story short, it is all well and good. It is over the fireplace. It looks awesome. It works awesome. It's on this floating mount. Like I can pull it down anything between, like I said, 0 and 27 inches, and it just holds exactly where it is. The sound bar is mounted to it. It is all well, and it's all good. But it was, 4K and HDR10, and I was rocking a 1080p plasma display from way back when, which in and of itself was an awesome display as well. So that meant I had to go buy a new Apple TV, right? Because I needed the 4K one and all those kinds of things. But really, at the end of the day, for less than $1,000, I ended up with a 70-inch panel and the mount and the Apple TV and everything else that I needed. And like I said, it's rocked out and ready to go and really cool. But now I'm not allowed to buy myself anything else for the holidays. So what we do there is we create a shopping list, like a wish list on Amazon.
Yep.
And we make that public and we call it Scott's Christmas list. And then that's what gets sent out to all the family members, because I am officially on not allowed to buy things status.
Nice. So all of that said, you do realize that it's not Christmas yet. You're supposed to go stick the TV under the bed or hide it in a closet until Christmas. So you actually have something to open on Christmas.
No. I saved a little piece of the packing tape. It's fine. I'll be okay. And I will be just as surprised on Christmas as I was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving when I went and bought this thing. Tuesday or Wednesday or, whenever it was on its pre-sale and ready to go.
Nice. Well, you did better than I did. I spent a little bit more than you, but I've sat on cheap chairs in my office for a long time.
We all have. I'm sitting on a hardwood chair that was, again, purchased at Target. But it's really hard so that I have a standing desk like you do. Yep. And it forces me to stand up, because when one's buttocks falls asleep, you're like, oh, good, I got the tingle. It's time to stand.
See, and I had that problem. I have a chair and I have a standing desk, but then my desk is always going up and down, and I got tired of it, and I got tired of a cheap chair. So Herman Miller actually had 15% off all of their chairs. And they also had free shipping, including the option to have somebody deliver it in a 4-hour window and assemble it and put it all together for you. Was free. So I may have gone out, and they have I don't even know how you pronounce it. Is it Aaron?
Close enough.
Yeah, it's something like that. Pronunciations.
It's like Aaron Miller,
Aaron, something. But they have a bar height Aaron stool that I got. And I got it 15% off, and I'm going to come set it up. So now I don't have to move my desk. I can either just sit in my stool, which is comfortable, which means maybe I'll just end up sitting at my standing desk the whole time. Who knows? But that was my big Black Friday purchase. And then we picked up a few more things. Rokus were like 50% off. So picked up another Roku, and I don't even remember what else. A few Legos. Got some Legos because I got 2 free sets. You spent over $100, 2 free Lego sets.
They had some really good deals. I wish I had picked up one of the Saturn kits, but I imagine they'll come up again. They were down to almost $80, which was
I saw that.
pretty cool.
And then my wife was giving me a hard time because I have one sitting in my closet that I'm waiting to sell when she can't buy them anymore. And she's like, wasn't this the one that you stayed up till midnight and spent 3 hours trying to buy? Yeah, and your point.
Yeah, that's the one. How'd you guess?
I got it the day it was released, so there. It was good. It was a nice time. Good Thanksgiving. Now I got to get a bunch of work done to make money to pay for everything we bought.
Yeah, well, we're not going to get any work done because we're doing that conference next week, and then I'm sure we'll goof off after that, but we'll get there eventually. January is coming right up.
Mover is a cloud migration company that specializes in moving your company's files from file servers or cloud storage like Box, Dropbox, and Google into Office 365. Their patented technology makes Mover the fastest OneDrive file migrator in the world. Moving dozens of terabytes of data a day is a breeze. Use Mover's free, industry-leading migration guides, or ask for a managed migration and they'll take the lead. With Mover, all your data is secure and intact. Running completely behind the scenes, you don't lose time, money, or hair while you transfer. Scan, plan, migrate, report. Migrations that don't suck with Mover. Visit mover.io for more info. Yeah, we have the conference. We're both going to be down in Orlando next week at the Live 360 conference. So I have 3 sessions. I have like a fast, I can't remember what they call it. It's like a short 20-minute session where I'm going to do like the 5 things you need to know when you stand up Office 365. And then I have some other ones around Azure, PowerShell, automation, and then doing reporting on Office 365. So it should be good. You have a couple sessions. If anybody listens and is going to be down there, come hang out with us, keep us company.
Man, we should probably get into what we thought we were actually going to talk about today.
Now that we're a few hours in.
Yep.
One other thing I was going to say, microjobs went live. Do you have any jobs on microjobs? Did you put any out there? when they
No, I have not. I just watch you do your stuff because I have no time for extra work, even micro work.
You have a full-time job. So this is kind of a cool concept that Mark Jones put together. I'm working a little sleep here. And it's essentially, you can go out and either, if you're trying to go out on your own, if you're doing the independent thing and just want to put up like some small jobs, it's, hey, I can help you with Office 365 governance, or I can write a script for you, or I'll build a Power App for you, or just like, I feel like most of them are like a day or less type jobs, where if you just need some help on something, or if you're looking to make a little money and have a skill set, you just want to try to sell a few hours of extra work here and there, go check out his microjob site. Look at the jobs up there, put some jobs up there, go buy my jobs to help me pay for all my Black Friday shopping, that type of stuff. So just wanted to mention that too. I know he just went live like a week or so ago. So he's been trying to get the word out about that and get people out there and looking at the site.
Yeah, no, there's a ton of stuff out there on that one. It's been a little hard to take it all in.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I've had is I've looked at it and I'm like, I need to figure out a good way to dig through this, because there's some of those I could even buy to help with some work I have here and there. So I know he's constantly making tweaks, improvements to it. So if you do go look at it and have feedback, let him know. He loves the feedback. So on to our actual topic. We're like 15 minutes in now.
Yeah. No, we got tons of time left.
Yeah, exactly. MFA. This is a fun one.
Are people supposed to use MFA? Like, how does that work? What is your guidance to customers who say, I would like to do MFA?
My guidance is over the last 2 weeks, it has been the most secure way, or the best way to secure your data in Office 365, even from yourself.
Stop yourself from doing things. Yes, that's what we're all looking for as admins.
Let's turn on MFA and then nobody can get to my environment and life will be good. No, Microsoft has had, I do feel bad for them. It's tough. I can't imagine running a farm that size and services that size and making sure everything stays up all the time. Again, I feel like there should definitely have been more redundancy in there, but they've had a little bit of a rough stretch over the last, like 3 weeks or so. I know MFA has gone down. Did we say it was actually like 3 times in the last 3 days? I know there was... 3 times in the last couple of weeks. 3 days, yes. Yeah. 3 weeks.
Yeah, there's been a couple of outages that have popped up. So there were some outages back in September.
Yep.
So that was back in early September, right? Like September 5th.
And that was just all of Azure AD. That wasn't even just MFA. That was like Azure AD just quit working for a day.
Yeah. And we had the South Central outage, which caused some other things. There was the November 19th-ish, right around there, where they had a bunch of things in Europe that started kicking through and cascading into other systems and causing a bunch of problems with MFA. And then they had one earlier this week as well on the 27th. And then even some other service providers like Duo have been having some problems with authenticating to MFA or driving through to back-end features of Azure MFA, because Duo's got its own MFA system, but it still might be built out on top of something you leverage as a Microsoft customer, like conditional access.
Yeah. And all of this said, again, we don't want to beat Microsoft or Duo or anybody over the head with this, because it's hard. I mean, they have a tough job and we all have issues here and there. Some are just a lot more noticeable than others. But it goes back to just that whole concept we've talked about before, where a lot of people are like, oh, we're going to turn on MFA. And one thing especially to be careful with now is they have that global conditional policy that says, hey, any global admins, or not even global admins, any admins, make sure they have MFA on for their account.
Yep, global admins and service admins, right?
Yes.
That baseline security policy.
The baseline security. Well, this can lead to some real problems if you do have issues with MFA, whether it be Duo, whether it be Okta, whether it be Azure AD, in that who are those ones that are able to turn off MFA if you run into an issue with MFA?
So I think this brings up an interesting conversation. So should you put yourself in the best place you can with the best security posture you can for your data and for your users and all those things? Yes, right? And you get MFA, it's included in Office 365 E3s, right? You at least get the Office 365 MFA. You do get the baseline policy that's built in for those privileged roles within Azure Active Directory, all those things. You still have to plan for failure. Just because you're not running the infrastructure anymore doesn't negate the need to maybe have things like break glass accounts and all that good kind of stuff. So nobody's saying that you shouldn't turn on MFA.
Yep.
But when you do turn it on, you should always put yourself in the position to be prepared that systems may or may not be available, right? And when they're not, what are you going to do? So that's where those break glass accounts or other privileged accounts who aren't subject to those rules are going to be able to let you have a backdoor and have a way in. So it's kind of like when you go ahead and do your first verified domain in Office 365, and then all of a sudden you don't leave yourself somebody who's an admin in your onmicrosoft.com namespace. And then,
right.
You federated and ADFS went down and oops, I can't get in everything. Well, you always have to leave yourself a way in. And nobody's saying that has to be a global admin where the username and password are on a post-it note, right? If you're in a scenario where you have a way to securely store those credentials, keep them out of sight, request them on demand. Heck, if you're a smaller thing or you're in business for yourself, you don't need to have an enterprise password management solution. Maybe it's LastPass or 1Password or something like that. But you can go ahead and get there. You just have to recognize that you need to leave yourself a way in. And then you also need to kind of be able to evaluate and gauge the severity of these events. So for MFA being down, once it starts impacting your users, do you actually want to go and flip MFA off for all of them, for a few of them? What does that look like? Because now you're going to have to come back operationally, turn it back on, potentially walk them through a couple other steps to get them reset up and ready to go. It's an interesting problem to have. And then you have to of course, trust that the service provider is going to be working to get all that stuff back up and running for you.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's the biggest thing I took away from this is not, Microsoft had all these problems, we shouldn't trust MFA. It's exactly what you said. Have that break glass account. I know even me, I'm a single consultant. I have my own Office 365 tenant, but I do have two accounts. I have my normal account that I use day to day that does have MFA enabled. It has the passwordless MFA enabled on it even, which has worked really well. But then I do have another account that is non-MFA. It's a global admin. So if I have to, I can go turn it on or go disable it. If something happens, if I need to get in, MFA isn't working, that type of stuff. And again, like you said, I talked to some of my clients too that when MFA went down back on the 19th, they went and they were like, we got to turn this off for everybody right away. I think they spent almost as long fixing everything once they turned MFA back on as they did during the outage of people not being able to get to their stuff. So it is. It's always that evaluation of, okay, I'm going to go turn this off for 500 users. And great, they can get to all their stuff for the 2 or 3 hours that it's down. But then it takes another 2 or 3 hours and hundreds of help desk calls to get everybody re-enabled, re-authenticated, go through the whole MFA process, because it's not just you turn it off and turn it back on and it goes back to the way it was. It's turn it off and then you have to, I think you do have to always go in and re-verify everything again.
Yeah.
It's a process.
It's not the easiest thing to walk back through. If you have access to some of the more advanced features of MFA and, say you had that break glass account, one of the other things that would have been a viable option would have been able to go in and maybe whitelist more IP ranges for trusted IP ranges for MFA. So rather than disabling it, and again, you'd have to weigh this out, is it worth maybe just turning it off for more IP ranges? So that way you don't have to mess with those 500 user accounts and you just kind of gate it at the service level and get it where it needs to be with trusted IPs, things like that. For the break glass stuff, because I know everybody reads the documentation when they go ahead and roll out Office 365 and Azure AD, it is included in the security role planning docs. So I'll make sure we have a link in the show notes that actually talks about how to create these accounts and how to think about administering them, right? But you don't have to necessarily do it that way. It's just like guidance to kind of go ahead and get you there and help you understand what's happening. I think one of the other things that would probably be helpful to explain to everybody is understanding how Microsoft triages incidents and runs through incident response. So they have a whole life cycle for incident response. It is published how they approach it. Long story short, Microsoft focuses on remediation and recovery. So this is sometimes to the detriment of customer communication. And I know every time there's one of these outages, one of the biggest complaints that you'll see is everybody saying, what's going on? Why isn't Microsoft telling us what's happening? I need to have a sense for how long this is going to impact me so that I can make that evaluation, right? And make that educated decision. More data equals better decision making.
Yeah.
But for better or for worse, you have to recognize the way that Microsoft is approaching it. So I would also encourage everybody to go out and understand the way Microsoft looks at incident response and incident triage, and really take to heart that they are focusing on getting these services back up and running, maybe just a little bit more than communicating it out to customers. And that's while it's going on. They are also committed to providing RCAs, or root cause analysis, for all of these issues as they occur. So you can always go into things like status history. In this case, this was an Azure Active Directory issue. So your most verbose status history is going to be in Azure status history, right? It's not going to be something over in Office 365 land, but you can absolutely go in and read why the issue occurred, how Microsoft fixed it, and then their plans to mitigate that in the future. So you can also potentially adjust your operational mindset for how you're going to approach these things as well.
Right, because you do. I mean, you have to figure Microsoft, every time this goes down, they're learning. There's not a lot of use cases or documentation that they can follow on best practices for running a data center or a service as large as Office 365. They're pretty much the ones writing the book on it. So they're learning some of the stuff. They're figuring it out too. And like you said, as they come away with those root cause analysis, they'll adjust services. They'll adjust how load balancing works. It's interesting looking through a lot of those. A lot of it seems to, there's an initial issue, and then it seems to, from there, end up almost snowballing because services start getting overwhelmed. Like traffic, just that process of getting all the traffic rerouted once something goes down seems to be one of the biggest challenges as you read through some of these root cause analysis. Is there was an issue and then another service got overwhelmed and everything just went downhill from there.
Yeah, you think about it. So which one was it? The November 19th RCA. So when they run through that, they had a problem with the MFA front ends and their ability to communicate to the back end cache.
Yep.
And that's all in Redis. So once they started noticing that, there's a high load and, that cascades, like you said, into just a race condition. So they never knew it was there because they had never hit it. And all of a sudden, okay, we hit that and what happens? And that cascades into a bigger issue, which eventually leads to them having to restart all of the cache services, which, okay, we had to restart the cache. That means they need to rebuild the cache too, which is computationally expensive, right? There's a lot of CPU and other things that are going to be involved there. So it's this really weird back and forth. But long story short, you have to understand part of your SLAs as you've adopted these systems. You have to have a plan to overcome potential service provider failures, or when you can't overcome those, a way to communicate them to your users, right? This is why you bought this service, so somebody else could deal with this stuff. Absolutely do break class accounts and go back and read the RCAs. There's some good stuff in there.
Yep, absolutely. When it comes to email, Outlook and Office 365 are fantastic, but sometimes there are things you'd like to do that aren't implemented. Sperry Software creates Outlook add-ins and Office 365 services that fill in these gaps. For instance, there are Outlook add-ins to automatically print emails and or attachments, save emails to PDF, send out recurring emails, or how about a warning when you're going to do a reply to all instead of a normal reply? Find these and many more email productivity solutions. Get started today by visiting www.sperrysoftware.com/cloudit.
You want to talk about nested virtualization too?
We said we were, so we should dive into this one a little bit because I was playing with it a couple nights ago.
Yeah.
Literally a couple nights ago because I was up till 4:15 a.m. playing with nested virtualization.
Lucky you.
Oh, yeah. It was 3 hours of sleep the next morning. It was great. So what is nested virtualization?
Well, we're talking about nested virtualization within Azure. So this would be the ability to install a hypervisor and Hyper-V in this case, right?
Not just any hypervisor.
Yeah.
I have tried others. They don't work.
Yeah, so a Windows virtual machine, we're talking about Windows Server with the Hyper-V role enabled, and then being able to enroll guests on top of that. So maybe you want to run Docker on Windows, and you're going to do Linux containers in Windows. Well, that requires a little Hyper-V VM, right? So you need to be in a virtual machine that supports nested virtualization. Or in your case, you had this older thing that you wanted to be able to run. You just go ahead and run that up. There's a bunch of scenarios for why you may or may not want to use this, even if it's just lab scenarios, right? Testing maybe migrations with migration products into Azure, AWS, things like that. I need a place to have guest VMs and big beefy hosts rather than buying yourself a new laptop or a new server to rack. Just go ahead and spin something up in the cloud. When you get ready to do this, there's a couple of prerequisites. The one that I always forget, and then I go back and have to recreate that host VM, is you need to be in a virtual machine series that supports nested virtualization. So that would be any VM series that ends in V3. So any V3 VM is going to be on the right types of CPUs and on the right hypervisor hosts within the Azure data centers that are going to allow you to have those features and be all ready to go.
Yep. And that I actually did not make that mistake.
Well, that's because you read the documentation.
Well, no, I really didn't. I read the beginning of the documentation because then I ran into a whole bunch of networking issues, or some of the issues with just getting the networks spun up right and creating the right networks and getting the traffic routed properly. But it came in really handy. Like you said, my case was I have a client that needed an old Windows Server 2003 environment for 2 weeks. They had to stand up a program, extract a bunch of data, and then just throw it all away. They didn't have any 2003 on-prem. They didn't really have the hardware to do virtualization on-prem. So it's hey, let's just go spin up a 2016 server, spin up Windows Server 2003 in Hyper-V, which, yes, I realize it's not supported. It does work. There's some workarounds because you don't necessarily get the mouse right away. So you have to do a whole bunch of keyboard stuff and go find drivers to download for network adapters and switch network adapters around and all of that, which was also part of my networking problem, but it did work. End of the day, it's up. I can remote desktop into it. I can use it just like a normal server, but it's a 2003 VM sitting in Hyper-V in Windows Server 2016 running in Azure. It's it's this whole inception type thing with VMs.
It is. And even all the things like enhanced VM Connect and all that stuff, if you're not running Windows Server 2003 as your virtual machine guest on that host, all that stuff works. So Microsoft has a great article on docs.microsoft.com, which actually walks you through step by step how to do a bunch of this stuff. In your case with Server 2003, you still would have had to figure out, how to get that network the first time. But it talks about the features you need to have, how to go ahead and install Hyper-V. It also talks about network connectivity. So one of the things you'll want to do with your Hyper-V hosts in Azure is make sure you use internal switches. And you think, internal switch, I'm not going to be able to get to that guest from outside of the host, right? I would always have to go up to the host. I'm not saying that at all. You can absolutely enable networking on those guests, get their NICs attached to that internal network and that internal switch. You just have to NAT from the host back to the underlying guest, which is pretty easy to do these days. It's not too bad, just a little bit of PowerShell to fire things up.
Yeah, and that was the part of the documentation I quit reading before I got to, was all the networking stuff. Had I read it, I probably could have gone to bed at 2 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock. I also had a blue screen in there, 2003 blue screened on me when I was setting it up and had to go redo it all. Imagine that.
Nice. Just run into all the things.
Yes, but the documentation does work. Once I actually read the documentation with the PowerShell scripts that they provide and setting up that internal switch and all of that, I was like, oh, that all makes sense now. And the PowerShell scripts just worked. So it really is. For me, it's a pretty seamless process. It's pretty easy to do if you actually read the documentation, choose the right VM, run the PowerShell. And again, had it been on a much newer version of Windows 2, it would have been significantly easier. 2003 posed some very unique challenges, to say the least.
But I think the really cool thing about it, and the great thing about that scenario, is you were able to get it done. And you're able to get it done a lot quicker and get things stood up and where they need to be, which is awesome, right? Like that's a great scenario and a great story just when you're approaching these things and thinking about, maybe how can I use it or what can it be used for?
Right. And I think that is that scenario because there's nowhere else I could have stood up a 2003 VM with any level of success, given the constraints, the hardware, the data centers that I had available to me for this particular client. So it was a no-brainer. And again, it really did. It worked well. And because it's temporary, I can just throw it all away after 2 weeks and it's not a big deal.
Not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's got to be a big deal for somebody, but...
Or I'll just shut it down and leave it up there since I don't have to pay for deallocated VMs.
So somebody paid for you to have that virtual machine running for a while. And quite often those hosts can be a little bit more expensive because we're doing the nested virtualization thing. So there can be some downstream impacts there.
Yes, a little bit more CPU utilization, memory, storage, obviously, because you're storing that virtual hard drive now on your Azure storage. And yeah, a little more cost, but again, especially for that temporary scenario, it really did work well.
Very cool. What else? That's probably good for today.
Yeah, I think that about wraps us up for today. I realized about halfway through this recording that I had a meeting about 20 minutes ago that I was supposed to be at. Oops. All right. That's what happens when we start running behind and it's just the snowball effect. So I told him I'll be late.
All right. Well, we'll let you get to your meeting. So thanks for your time today, Ben.
Not a problem. Thank you. And we'll see you next week down in Orlando. If you enjoyed the podcast, go leave us a 5-star rating in iTunes. It helps to get the word out so more IT pros can learn about Office 365 and Azure. If you have any questions you want us to address on the show or feedback about the show, feel free to reach out via our website, Twitter, or Facebook. Thanks again for listening and have a great day.